You're listening to WKDW Radio 97.5 and KDWRadio.com, broadcasting from the Bishop West Real Estate Mobile Tower right here in Northport, Florida. And I've got a very, very special guest in the house. I'm going to let her introduce herself again. I'll give you the mic.
Hi, John. Thank you for inviting me back. My name is Joan.Derrig-Heacox. I have a PhD in practical theology, and my research study was on women survivors of domestic violence. I currently work for C.A.R.E, which is Charlotte County's Center for Abuse and Rape Emergencies. I work with victims and families and friends of domestic violence victims and sexual assault victims and volunteers. I'm the volunteer coordinator.
So, being the volunteer coordinator, what are you in need for right now within the community?
Right now, we are in need of volunteers that are willing to go through the training, and it's quite a bit of training, but it's very important training. It's very important training really for everyone to go through the training, just to have an awareness when they're in the world and they can recognize people that have experienced trauma. But we need volunteers that become advocates, and they work with women and men as well that have been sexually assaulted, and they are in the hospital and working with law enforcement to press charges. And so we are an on-call 24/7, 365 days a year organization. So day or night, if someone has a sexual assault or is raped and goes to the hospital, we are called. So we need volunteers that take those on-call hours and work with us. Also work on our hotline, do outreaches.
Let's talk a little bit about the outreach, because we do this once a month. So we're trying to, with the conversation each and every month, we're trying to educate the community on what this is about, how to prevent it, but also really how to pay attention to community members. Do you want to talk a little bit about how community outreach is really educating the community too?
Yes. So we have different people that do different jobs with C.A.R.E. Laura is our outreach advocate. We also have prevention advocates that go to schools, colleges. I'm personally going to be speaking at a nursing school, nursing class in Fort Myers at Nova Southeastern. Southeastern. I'll be speaking to that class about prevention. And so as far as outreach is concerned, we need to be in the community and talking to people. Our outreach includes not just working with students, like I mentioned, but going to the food bank and being at the food bank, the Harry Chapin Food Bank, once a week. And when they're handing out food, we're talking to the people as they're coming up. We're giving them information about our victim services. We're asking questions. We're looking for people that have been experiencing some form of domestic violence or trauma. We are noticing something recent, and that women are being dropped off on the street corners by their boyfriends or husbands. Maybe they've relocated to Florida, can't find housing. Maybe they got in a fight, something happens, and they're literally being dropped off at a street corner and left homeless and without money. So we're in the homeless shelters. We're going to Jesus Loves You Ministry and the Homeless Coalition and a lot of different organizations where we're there, and we have been able to help women who were dropped off, left homeless without money, and a means of support or getting home or connection. They've wandered into some of these outreaches, and we're there, and we've been able to help bring them into our shelter or even relocate them back up north or wherever they came from. Well, so those are some of the outreaches that we do.
Well, you mentioned partners too. Do you want to talk a little bit of how your partners play a key role when you're going out and you're having outreach programs directly connected with them?
Well, I just mention and give a shout out to Restoring Oaks. So yesterday we did get rained out, but we were there. Restoring Oaks organized an event at the Port Charlotte beach, and there were 20 vendors there. A lot of them were, C.A.R.E was there. We had a team. We had our staff. I was their volunteer coordinator. We had as volunteers there, but there were other partners, and I'm sorry, I'm not going to remember everybody. The food bank was there. Financial Woodman, I believe, was there. And different organizations that do outreach in our community were there for to help celebrate and restore community, to be in conversation and provide support for each other, and to create awareness around sex trafficking. So Restoring Oaks Thomas works with a lot of sex trafficking, which is a huge problem here. And what does sex trafficking look like? They're acquiring primarily girls, some boys, not just young girls, but even college age or young adult women through dating websites, and they're reaching out, trying to be a boyfriend, trying to get them to meet them, developing rapport. They're very charismatic, and they get them out. They meet them someplace, and then oftentimes will use drug and alcohol, gifts and things and charism, very charismatic, promise them the world, and then they fall in love, move in with them, and now all of a sudden that boyfriend becomes the trafficker, and they're forced into participating in sexual acts against their will. They're often drugged. So they're sexually assaulted. They can't get away. Every bit of their money and income that they earned does not go to them. Their phones are taken away. Like I said, they're created addictions. They're addicted to drugs, and then they are drugged, so that they are doing it because they're drugged, and then become addicted, and they do it for the drugs. So it's a cycle of violence and entrapment. I shouldn't use that word, but yeah, they get brought into it and cannot get out.
Well, you don't want to use certain words, but um, can you talk a little bit about the the teenage years, and maybe what the younger generation should be watching out for, um, because are we still number 6 in the nation in human trafficking?
For
Human trafficking.
I don't know what number we are. I'm sorry, I don't have that
That's okay.
statistic. I didn't look that up.
I'm gonna try to look us up,
But we are. I think we're number one for human trafficking. We are number one in the world. The United States is number one in the world for human trafficking, and that does not mean crossing borders, or crossing state lines, or crossing county lines. The people that are buying the trafficking, that are buying the services of sex trafficking, are United States citizens. Your average guy on the street is buying sexual
well,
abuse, sexual experiences.
I did pull it up though, and unfortunately, we are number 3 behind California and Texas. And that kind of makes sense because it's the sunnier states, and we got year-round access, it seems like, and a lot of a lot of vacationers. So we're very transient, all 3 of those states, and that has a lot to do with it, doesn't it?
It does. The transientness of it, that people are coming to Florida, for example, or California. One big problem is homelessness. Like, they get down here and there's no place to stay. And so they're looking for places to stay. It's easy to stay in Florida when it's, I have to say, 95 degrees than it is to stay in Minnesota when it's below 30 degrees year round, right? I mean, you can, and that's what attracts people. The vacation area, it looks like so much fun all the time. And then the affluence of drugs
Yep. And all
and
this, all these
partying,
things are,
the partying mentality.
and they're all a key factor that play hand in hand with each other. Um, the I'm going to go back to
Also,
the
transportation,
yeah, well that too, because ease of exit, right?
right? Ease of entry, ease of exit.
And then you've got
But they're not in Florida. They're not necessarily transporting them anywhere. It's they're not necessarily being transported someplace else.
well,
That used to be a big factor up in Toledo because of the highway crossing. But here, yeah, Ohio's number 6 now.
yeah.
Ohio and Michigan and New York, because they're that line, this line of states across Route 80 that goes across the northern United States.
Well, and
It's big cities. It's where the big cities are too, where people go to the big city
well,
thinking
and
they can
I'm
get a job, get housing, get
right.
something.
And I'm going to kind of jump ahead a little bit. Calendar year, we do a human trafficking event down in Port Charlotte. Do you want to talk briefly about that? Because I would love to get more people there, more people involved.
Right. So in January, we have C.A.R.E puts on a seminar, brings in speakers, people that have been trafficked, so that they can talk about how easily they got caught up in it without them being aware at a very young age. We had, I'm sorry, I forgot his name, but we had a retired detective come in and talk about human trafficking and the sex trade, and who's buying it. Well, he said, why can't we stop it, and why can't we stop this human trafficking? Instead of charging the girl who's underage for prostitution, why are we not charging the person purchasing the sex service who's an adult male over the age of 18? And he said, it's because it's your average person out there. It's your neighbor. It's people in government. It's people in law enforcement. It's people in schools. I mean, it crosses all borders. So there's no limit to who that person is.
Well, and
They look like you and me, right?
they do, and I pulled this up because I know we were number 6 at one point, and I'm sure that may have been older
Excuse me.
data, or it could have been the effect of COVID or something. But the fact that we're number 3 makes me feel worse because I was trying to get us to number 7, not number 3.
Not
And it,
number 3.
yeah, I don't. This is one of those polls where you don't want to be number 1.
No.
And so there's organizations like C.A.R.E that are here again I'm gonna circle back around to the outreach of information and what a vital part people can play. And even though it seems like a long way out, we're only 5 months away from January, and the fact that we're
Right.
inside that 6 month time frame. If somebody were to want to get involved with C.A.R.E for the human trafficking event or anything else that they look on your calendar for, how would they do that?
Well, first of all, the easiest way for them to get hold of us is to call our phone number, which is 941-639-5499, is one of our main lines. 941-627-6000 is our hotline. And that's the line to call, is the hotline to call. And what you'll ask for Joan. Can we speak to Joan? We want to volunteer. We want to be a part of what's happening. We want to be a part of the change. We want to be a part of the awareness. But most importantly, I ask people right now to put in their phones, in their contact information, the hotline 941-627-6000, 6000. Put that contact number information in your phone, have it with you. If you see it and you witness it, you can share that phone number, or you can call us yourself and say, this is what I'm seeing. What should I do? Or what can I do? So we're always handing out information at outreaches, mostly because we want people to have our phone number so they can call us. If you see it, report it, tell somebody, call somebody, you can save a life. You can
Well,
save a life.
and would you say that if you have that, I want to say the hair on the back of your neck that stands up, and you think that there's anything, isn't it to err on safety versus anything else?
Yes, because many people, older, I'm going to speak of an older generation, many people were taught, don't say anything. It's not your business. It's none of your business. What a man does in his house is his business, or whatever. And again, that's not true anymore. A man or a woman cannot harm people in their own house just because it's in their house. And that goes back to domestic violence. October is Domestic Violence Awareness Month. And that is a lot of this starts in domestic violence. And that is where a person believes, one, that they have the right to abuse women, the right to rape, the right sexual assault, the right to financially to take away their finances, to keep them financially dependent. So when you're in a situation where someone believes that they have the right to sexually, emotionally abuse, physically abuse, financially abuse, any time of abuse to women and children, that's a crime. We need to talk about that, the fact that that's a crime. That's not, you get to do what you want to do in your own home. The lasting effects of child abuse and children witnessing spousal abuse is what perpetuates and maintains this crime in our community. Before, it wasn't recognized as a crime, or it was negated as a crime, minimalized. And so what happens is that we internalize this and intellectualize and justify abuse. And then it shows up everywhere.
We've had a lot
So,
more of the abuse, um, that has, I think, been identified differently today than in the past, because we've got organizations that are educating. Uh, I want to go into even athletes and athletics now. Is that we're kind of, I think we're seeing the education and the law side of things being restored, I think, through like the NBA, NFL, Major League Baseball. You've got the WNBA, where even the WNBA, when it's female on female, there we just had one that was broadcast out. So I think the awareness of it all is, instead of being what they were for decades, which was hush hush, we don't want to ruin the brand. Well, I think they've decided we don't want to ruin the brand hiding behind all this either. Do
yeah,
you want to
yeah.
talk a bit about that?
There's another good player. Yeah, yeah. You're not the only good player out there. So if you're gonna, and one of the things, I did a leadership training, and this leadership training talked about what you do in one thing, you do in all things. So the way you behave and your integrity, and the way you do it in one area is you do in all ways. So if you can have integrity in one area of your life, the point is that you develop having integrity in all areas of your life. But the reverse is true. If you have abuse in one area of your life, that abuse and that attitude and belief system that I have the right to abuse is reflected in all areas of your life. So I think that's speaking to, like you're saying in the NBA, and saying, if you're abusive at home, then we know that abuse in our home, physically abusing, raping, assaulting, coercion. Coercion's a really difficult one, but a coercion and getting people to consent to something because they're fearful for their life. When you use that type of manipulative behavior, it's destructive and it's illegal. In some states, coercion, there is laws about coercion. Getting back to the athletes, that we're just finding that, is that the kind of person we want to do business with? Is that the kind of person we want representing our business? And before, we used to put it under the rug, or, well, that had nothing to do with politics or religion or whatever. It didn't have anything to do. We were really good at categorizing. We would just put it in a little box and stick it over here, abuse and sexual assault. Well, they are only doing it over here in this little box. They're not doing it over here where you're doing business. We
Right.
separated them, but in fact, it's not.
And it's you've been doing, how many years you've been doing this?
Well, I've been with C.A.R.E for 1 year. I have been researching sexual assault, domestic violence, narcissism, behaviors of trauma and trauma biology, the neurobiology of trauma, for many, many, many years, probably 20 some years. And I saw domestic violence when I was working as a chaplain in the hospital systems and in ministry. So domestic violence and child abuse. So I was aware of all of that, and for many, many years, and just different locations and different areas of work.
So you've got a history, you've got a background, you've got a lot more insight from what you do for a living than most. I'm going to try
Yes.
to pull the outreach side of things in with athletics and bring that kind of back around again, because uh, you're not just an organization that's talking to churches and other entities. You're also wanting to talk to even some of the youth programs and athletic programs that are out there to try to get them educated on certain things too, aren't you?
Yeah, that's a really good idea. Uh, which is, again, well, we need more volunteers. We need more volunteers to become trained, to understand the neurobiology of trauma, to understand what domestic violence looks like, and how a woman who's lived in domestic violence behaves. I mean, there's not a behavior pattern, but what makes them traumatized and perpetuates and creates responses. So we need more volunteers, and we need you to go through the training. And you'll be so glad. Everyone that goes through the training is like, this was amazing. I'm so glad I went through this. And all of a sudden they see things. Oh, I see everything, the world differently now. But yes, going to talking. All they have to do is, any sports organization, the little leagues, they can call us and ask us to have, we call it a prevention advocate, come out and talk to you, especially kids. We work with the Boys and Girls Club. So if Girl Scouts, if they want somebody to come and talk to them at a Girl Scout event or a Boy Scouting event or sporting event, sports team, we can come and talk to people and help them, to understand what this looks like, and to be able to communicate if something is happening in their own home,
Well,
to help them. Go ahead.
and I we've got just a small delay, and we were working on that prior. I'm hoping the video turns out good for everybody, but there's a lot of great information that is on the website that you guys offer, but there, all the numbers are there, all of the ways to contact C.A.R.E to get information, even if you know someone who may need some information. It's best to ask for a professional way to approach, and even those people can call you and ask insight on what do you say to somebody, how do you suggest it. Do you want to talk just a little bit about some of those things?
Well, I think helping people recognize the signs of particularly domestic abuse or trauma. So someone who has a very difficult time making decisions, and feeling a sense of self-esteem has probably gone through some form of I'm going to say childhood, because almost everything can be taken back to a childhood experience that may seem minor to an adult, but could have been very major to a child. Remember, children are great observers, but they're often poor interpreters. They don't understand, because of their own maturity level, what they're seeing and what's happening. And so, someone, just talking a little bit about the neurobiology, is when somebody experiences trauma. And I'm telling you this because this is what you're going to see. I just recently watched an excellent webinar put out by domesticshelters.org about, which we call non-state torture, where there are families and community within small communities, even not just big communities, not just poor, but just anywhere, where they're actually torturing children and using them to sell children to their family, friends, neighbors within a community. And they refer to it as torture. So that is something that's coming out new, because we address it as assault or abuse, but it's a far greater uh, form of abuse, like torture, that is used like by governments when they're trying to, elicit information. I don't know, but it's a very far end form of abuse that is pretty awful. And so this is happening in families, neighborhoods, and it goes unseen. So I forgot what your actual question was, but I wanted to talk to you a little bit about what you would see. So if you're out in the community and you're with a friend or family, and you notice in a, let's just say, a marital relationship, where the person, and most of the time it's female. Okay, so most of the time the abuser is a male, and it's the female that's being abused. So I'm going to use the he, she in that situation. It also is the reverse. But when a male partner is extremely jealous of their female partner, and is always telling them that, or is telling them that they can't have certain friends, they can't have male friends, they can't talk to their girlfriends. They become very jealous about the way they look, insinuating that they're looking too sexy, or that their dress is too short, or they're whatever. They're blaming the spouse, on creating some sort of scenario that is making them jealous. But that jealousy is a way of controlling and manipulating them. They are so jealous, they don't want them to spend any time away from the partner. So in the beginning of a relationship, oftentimes that feels really good. He wants to spend all his time with me, and he wants to be with me all the time. And isn't that sweet and romantic? Except the backside of that is it's controlling and manipulative. Um, Anytime someone says, I have to get permission, key word here is permission. I have to get permission from my spouse to be able to do anything. Well, that's different than saying, hey, I just need to check with my spouse to see if he's okay with it or she's okay with it, see if we have some other plans. But permission is different. I have to have permission is a form of abuse. Anytime you are embarrassed and shamed in front of a group, either by yourself, somebody says things, your spouse says things that embarrasses you. Maybe they talk about your weight, or maybe they tell people, oh, what if, and they tell dirty jokes, insinuating that that's you. Again, dirty jokes, chauvinistic jokes. I call them rape jokes. It's amazing how many people tell jokes about sexual assault and act like it's funny. So stopping that, right there in its trap and say, hey, that's a rape joke. Not going to laugh, not interested. And that's happened to me. Um, so embarrassing, shaming, telling jokes that are degrading or stereotypical, diminishing or negating a female's experience. Controlling finances. We have a lot of older women that have maybe not worked a lot or have been I was a stay-at-home mom for many, many years. I didn't bring in any income. I was the child care provider, took care of the house. So, what do you do about money? Like, do you have access to money? Do you have the freedom to use money and spend money the way you want? And I don't mean frivolously, but I mean, if somebody is entrapping you in a marriage and keeping you from going anywhere, doing anything, or making you show receipts, so that they control every cent you spend and only give you don't have a credit card in your name. All women should have credit card and money and a bank account. That's another form of abuse. We call it financial abuse. So women that are in a domestic violence situation, they can't escape because they have no money. And they get left on a street corner and they end up at the homeless shelter. They have no source of income, or they've never have not worked in a long time, have no skills to get a job. Let's see. When someone makes you feel guilty about the problems in the relationship, blaming one person for the reasons. Well, I wouldn't beat you if you would have made a nicer dinner. I wouldn't beat you if you didn't, you weren't smiling. So I'm going to demonstrate, that it's your fault that I beat you. It's your fault that I raped you. I wanted to have sex. So sex was another thing. Up until the 1980s, the law said that men could rape their wives, that women had to have sex, whether they wanted to or not, because they were married. And so now the law states that a man cannot rape his wife. She has the right to say no. And women always have the right to say no. And no is a complete sentence. No is a complete sentence. I do not have to justify why I say no for anything. Often preventing women from working, right? They won't even let them work. I'm the breadwinner. I'm the head of the household. Again, these are some pretty long-standing 1950s father knows best kind of mentalities that have really disempowered women and trying to get women's power back, financial power back. Damaging property. Walking through the house, if she says no, or you walk in the house and he doesn't like the way things are, or he just wants to be abusive, kicking and breaking things, throwing things, kicking the toys across the room, smashing things, tearing things, cutting things up, especially her things, as a way of abuse. It's an emotional abuse.
So
Threatening
right,
against, go ahead.
The list that you just rattled off, how many was that?
Oh, and it's longer.
Yeah, I know.
Well,
Here's
I'm not even done yet.
Here's the beauty, though. How many times do you get to rattle this list off?
Not very often, so I'm super excited.
Yeah. So, but we also have to take a minute and digest that list, because
Yeah,
that's intense. But if you think it's intense on this side, imagine being involved in it on the other side. So,
correct.
there is something to be said about Realtalk and C.A.R.E having a real conversation and trying to get real information to people to hear and digest. And that's really what you're trying to do with the outreach program that you're doing today.
Yes.
And I
want you to hear it.
I keep circling the outreach program, and so go ahead and finish the list. I if you're excited about it, so am I, because this is the way to get this information out and people to hear it.
Yeah, it's frightening. It's frightening to think about this. So one of the more recent ones that we're seeing too, or I've seen a lot of, is threatening to commit suicide, where the spouse will say, if you leave me, I will commit suicide. If you leave me, I will kill our children. I will kill the dog. I will kill your parents. I will go to their house and I will destroy them. So when you see murder, suicide, and the kids are dead and the wife is dead, and then the husband kills himself, most of the time that's what you see. That's domestic violence. That's called intimate terrorism. When a woman is living in terror of her life, her children's life, she will stay. She will stay no matter what, because she knows he will kill her. He will kill the children. He will kill the dog. He will go after her parents. And we see it enough on TV, the murder suicides. That's intimate terrorism. She's not leaving. And pressuring you to have sex or swinging, that's another thing where your partner wants you to go swing, which means have sex with other partners, and you don't want to, but you don't have a choice. You're being coerced to do it because otherwise they will withhold money, they will withhold love, they will withhold affection, they will withhold make a very uncomfortable environment. And anytime somebody's intimidating you with a weapon, and it can be a gun. So the most dangerous households are households with guns in them, because most of all the homicides for women, the women that are homicides, are done by their partner. So women are killed by their partner by guns in the house, guns and knives. And this is a very serious threat. Also, strangulation. There's no weapon involved but your hands. Strangulation, a partner can strangle their partner, the man can strangle his wife within 3 minutes. Within 3 minutes, she can be dead. So anytime we hear that there's strangulation involved, or he's grabbing her throat or putting her hands around her neck and stopping her from breathing, even if it's for a second or two, hitting her or punching her and strangling her, that's very serious violence. That's very serious. And that's what our shelters that's where shelters were created, because we had to get women out of these environments before they were dead. So a woman will often attempt 9 attempts to leave her house. She will try and leave the partner on average 9 times. It's that difficult, because often in these domestic violence situations, she doesn't have the resources. She's in a trauma brain where everything is confusing. She's frightened for her life and she doesn't know where to go. And most people back away from that woman because they're afraid for their own life. Because if he's going to do it to her, what's going to keep him from doing it to them if they get involved?
So I'm going to stay there for a second, though. I think that is an important piece for the public to have to learn how to deal with. What are your suggestions for when you go through that list, when you are identifying things within the community? What is your suggestion right at that moment where you go, hey, you really need to talk to somebody? Is that where that person should call CARE and say, how do I do that?
Well, 2 things. So if you're a bystander and you're hearing this, and maybe it's your daughter or your son, or your daughter-in-law, or whatever, a family member, or even a neighbor. So we have had horrific homicides that were committed, domestic violence, that we never heard one word about. Like the police were never called to that house, and all of a sudden she walks out the door. She doesn't even get as far as the pulling out of the driveway. Her husband comes out and shoots her dead. So never even been called. No one even knows. That's how isolated women can become in these relationships. So if you suspect it, you can call CARE and talk to CARE about it. So they will give you some helpful hints on what are you seeing and what can you do. You can always call the police, and you can always get the police involved. 50% of all police calls are domestic violence. We need to continually train our law enforcement on how to handle domestic violence, because most people, most of the time, and I'm going to say with law enforcement, they're frustrated because they go in, they don't know who's hitting who. You know, their mentality, and most mentality of law enforcement, I'm not calling them out because I really respect law enforcement, please. We've got great officers out there doing great work. They show up and they don't know who the bad guy is, right? Because maybe she hit him back after he's battered her for years. She hits him back and now she's charged. Also, they will charge women. Oh, this is really interesting. Let me stay with, I'll go to this other point in a second. But so call police officer. Tell them what you see, tell them what you suspect. So they have a better idea of what they're walking into. It's very dangerous for law enforcement to walk into a domestic violence situation because we do not know whether he has a gun, whether he has a weapon of sorts, how much damage he has done. And most often when terrorism is involved, very severe abuse, and the woman can't get out, she will not press charges against him and she will not leave because if he leaves, he could lose his job. Now there's no funds and we've got kids involved. So calling law enforcement is really, really important because it gets them a heads up, but give them as much information as you can. What do you suspect is happening? What have you witnessed? And be specific about details. Also document it. If you're noticing it, document it. There's an app called Bright Sky. So women can actually document their domestic violence or their violence on an app. You can do that too if you're seeing it for your loved one or family member and can't quite get in there. This is a slow process. It does not happen overnight often to get someone out because they are so tied to it and trapped into it. An interesting phenomenon that happens is, let's say the wife is being abused. He has beaten her and he is now starting to beat the children. If she doesn't defend the children, especially if there is a divorce, or he can file the county or the services, whatever, they can file charges against the female for failure to protect her children. But he's the one that's the abuser, and they will give him custody because she's failure to protect. So there are a lot of ways that women struggle to keep themselves and their children safe. And once you've been traumatized and you've lived in a state of trauma, post-traumatic or ongoing complex trauma in a domestic violence household, it's very difficult. So Bright Sky is something that came out. I found out about it through one of the domesticshelters.org, which is a resource for finding out more and more about domestic violence. They've got great articles and webinars. But they talked about Bright Sky as a website that provides practical support and information and how to respond to domestic violence, and also how to record it, like document it.
And
so that
while
that's new, by the way.
And I love it because we're at least trying to get the most current information out there, and to have another organization putting that together. Talk about the value of the documentation.
Documentation is key. It's very, very important that you document what's happening. Date, time, who was there, where did it happen, who witnessed it. Also very important if there was somebody that witnessed it. Because oftentimes domestic violence isn't one incident. What happens is you can control a person's behavior simply by hitting them one time. And all you have to say is, like, let's just say it was Christmas and he got mad because you didn't make dinner right, or you didn't have it done on time, whatever. and he throws the food, smashes the table, yells and screams, and hits you, or just threatens to hit you. And then, oh, I'm so sorry. I didn't mean for that to happen. I was having a bad day. Christmas is so stressful, and money and blah, blah, blah. And then you're like, okay, and you forgive them. And then 2 weeks later, you're putting dinner on the table. And then he says, if you don't do it right, remember Christmas. Remember what happened at Christmas. That keeps her right in line. And he didn't have to hit her again. He's trained her. He has trained her to subjugate herself to him, to back down and to do what he wants. So sometimes it only takes one incident.
How often does that happen?
What? Which part?
The second part of that, where you may not see the physical side, but the control, the voice, the tone, all those things. How often does that transition into that form of abuse?
I would say that probably all the time, because people are abused without, so most of us, and this is probably one of the problems with our statutes, Florida statute about domestic violence, that it has to be physical. So if I can't demonstrate a black eye, broken bones, bruises on my back or on my ribs, or hit in the head, if I can't show you those physical abuse, then the Florida statute says it's not abuse. So how do you document that, right? When they put their fists up next to your face, they don't touch you, but those fists are there, and the face looks like he's going to beat the crap out of you, and the fists are there. There's no abuse in the state of Florida. He didn't abuse you, and you back down. You do whatever he says. Kids are sitting there watching. What are you supposed to do?
And those.
So anytime.
Go ahead.
Go ahead.
Those things.
No, go ahead.
These are real things. These actually do occur.
Yeah, only all the time, every day.
Oh, I'm glad, and you put that so well. Only all the time, every day.
Only all the time, every day.
So
all those people that have disappeared from your friendships. Gee, what happened to Betty? She used to be so fun and outgoing, and she got married, and gosh, now you never see her anymore. Barely wave hi to her.
And so
ask, where did Betty go?
Where did Betty go? So
where did Betty go?
It's interesting that we actually haven't, and I'm going to go back to the app, the Bright Sky app, because the fact that that'll tell you where we are in society when we're thinking we need an app to at least control or write down the narrative that's happening, that and the information that one must have. But at least it gives them the ability to do that, and maybe with some structure now.
Well, the reason that we have to go this way, and we probably shouldn't even be telling this publicly about Bright Sky, but is because women can't document it. So if your abuser looks at your phone, they're seeing who you're calling, they're seeing who you're texting, they're seeing what you're looking up on, what you're Googling, on your computer. They're looking at everything. These abusers are serious. You can't write stuff down. You have to hide it. And they find it, and you are in grave danger if they find you documenting it. So documenting, as important as it is, if you're documenting this, you need to send it and give it to somebody. Bright Sky is just one method, but you need to be able to email it to a family member or a friend so that you can keep documenting it and they can keep it safe.
Well,
And we tell people it's dangerous if they find it.
we've got about 5 minutes left, and I want you to give the website information, contact information again, but I also want you to talk about the fact that and a police officer said this to me about the home invasion, that burglars spend 8 hours a day or more at their job trying to figure out how to get around alarms and get around all these things that come out on the market today. And they have that information in those systems in play. And I want to believe that even the abuser may be keeping up on current things out there too, and that's why they check their phone and check all these things to see if they're doing that. And I would think that even if they saw the Bright Sky app, that there's probably
It
some
might alert
abusers
them.
out there that are well versed on it at this point.
Probably at this point, yes. So that's a very important part. Abusers share abuse stories. They share with each other. Abusers know who other abusers are. And so if you're in an organization that doesn't want women to work, doesn't want women to vote, doesn't want women to have a right or a say in their body or how they choose to get medical care, or does not allow them to have money or finances, that's an organization that is working collaboratively with each other to tell each other how to continue to perpetuate this abuse of women, to subjugate women. They're telling each other how to do it. They're keeping each other informed. We'll use this technique, use that technique, use this law. The rule of thumb, everybody's got a thumb, right? So English law and laws, way ancient laws said, historically, you can beat your wife with a stick as long as that stick is not thicker than your thumb. If you beat your wife with a stick thicker than your thumb, that's a crime. But if it's thinner than your thumb or your thumb's width, you can beat your wife and you can do it every day and it's not against the law. So how there are abusers work with other abusers, and particularly if they belong to clubs and organizations that perpetuate the abuse and subjugation of women, they share ideas.
And
So remember the rule of thumb.
it's really important for everyone to understand that um, the information that's being talked about today isn't about anyone in particular, but it is about our current population and why we should actually feel at ease even having this conversation. If people were just tuning in, they're thinking, "Oh my gosh, they're kind of hitting hard right now on domestic violence and different issues that are out there." Well, that's because we have to, and without this voice, the airways aren't even talking about a lot of this stuff monthly, let alone daily. We've got some really bad, violent cities out there, and we barely talk about gun violence in those cities and the gang violence that's related to the gun violence. So it's kind of like this.
We're homicides against women, 50% are done by their spouse or boyfriend. That's the gun violence we need to be talking about. The use on their own within the home.
Yeah.
Gun violence within the home. Not gangs, not the stranger out there. The gun violence within the home, within children, between children, within a home. Women are danger. The most dangerous place for women sometimes is in their own home.
Well, and that is this whole conversation in a nutshell. Is that we're, when you start 40 minutes ago and you look at where we went through this whole radio broadcast and Facebook and YouTube broadcast. It's really, if you haven't, if it hasn't maybe targeted someone that you know, it at least is in the back of your head to start eyeballing and keeping your eyes out. And the stress levels in our communities right now are at an all-time high with the cost of food, the cost of fuel, all these things rising, and really the violent side of things, it kind of follows suit a lot of times with those two factors because they're stressors that trigger a lot of that behavior. And I'm not condoning it either, because we all have to recognize the stressors of our community so that we understand instinctually what good people will do, and maybe not a bad person, but hey, one bad day can create havoc. And so we,
Can
I think,
ruin somebody's life. Yeah.
yeah, and I
So
absolutely.
just think about, I want to make a point though. Abusers abuse. They use these excuses to abuse. It's important to differentiate. Everybody has stresses. And we're not talking about the guy that yells at his wife because, or the wife that yells at her husband because they had a bad day at work. We're talking about somebody that uses that to have power and control over another person. So abusers are abusing with intention to have power and control because they feel powerless often. And that's not an excuse, but they have intellectualized abuse and justified it and and negated the harm abuse does to a human being. And that's how they keep it going because they need power. I just want to say we at C.A.R.E need help. So we are grant funded for C.A.R.E, but everything we do in the community, whatever outreach we do, however we help people is through donations. So we need donations. C.A.R.E is we have fundraisers, and the C.A.R.E Auxiliary is a FUN fun fundraiser, and they're doing on September 23rd a really fun golf outing. Call C.A.R.E at 941-639-5499 or the other number I gave you, the hotline, and tell them you want to golf. We're doing a fun golf. It's super fun. It's a great day, but donations, we need your donations because it is the donations that provide relocation funds. So if somebody's been abused and we need to get them out of here, like maybe they got family up north, we need money to send them up north. We need money to help rehouse them. We need money to help train them. We need money to take care of them and give them, they've walked out with nothing and they got a baby and they got kids and they got nothing. And or they just need to get out, and housing is so expensive. We need money. We need volunteers. I always love volunteers. I love my volunteer team. They're so awesome. Shout out to all of them. But we also need money to do the work that we do. You know, the grants only go so far, but the real work in the community comes from donations. So donate to C.A.R.E.
Well,
and use our services. Don't be afraid to call us.
right.
Never be afraid to call us on our hotlines. We're
And
always there 24/7, middle of the night, every time.
and never be afraid to share this video, because this video can change someone's
Yes.
life too.
Yes.
So
Yes.
listen, we've run over. I took us off the air because I noticed that I was going long, but we stayed on 3 extra minutes on Facebook and YouTube. But the information you got out there was exactly what needed to happen. So I appreciate your time, and thanks for being part of the show.
Pleasure.
All right.
Always my pleasure.
Have a great day, and we'll talk to you soon. Everybody be
Okay,
safe, and
bye.
I'll see you on Friday.